Hello and welcome to the Leadmore podcast. I'm your host, John T. Meyer. The Leadmore podcast is the show where we sit down with leaders of today to help inspire leaders of tomorrow. Because I believe the world needs more leaders, and I also believe that leadership doesn't always look maybe the way we think it does or the way that we most often see it. So we're trying to showcase all sorts of leaders here on the Leadmore podcast, give them a voice, give them a platform, and learn from them so we can have more leaders. So are you ready to lead? Come on the journey with us. In this episode, sit down with Bill Anderson. Bill is the Chief Experience Officer at the First National Bank in Sioux Falls. It's a 136-year-old community bank, sort of like a debate on if it's the oldest bank here in town or not. There's some old stories that go way back. But Bill had a lot of stories to share. He has a really fascinating resume that ranges from starting his career at the Central Intelligence Agency as an analyst. He was a university professor. He was a startup founder. He was a partner at a marketing agency. And now he works at a bank and some other jobs in between there too. We tried to look through what's the through line through all those experiences. What's the commonalities? How has he used curiosity to sort of shape his career and use those tools along the way, but go on to the next thing, which I really found interesting, thinking about, what might be next for me and how you change and go into those new roles. We also talked a lot about anxiety and how leaders can deal with anxiety, with stress, with that pressure of feeling like you need to do more and always be going further and adding more to your plate. How do you handle all that? And how do you know when to step back and just be okay with it all? So Bill shares some great stories. I love the way his brain thinks. He has a fascinating mind, and you'll see that very quickly in this episode. So enjoy my conversation here with Bill Anderson. All right, here we are for another episode of the Leadmore podcast. I'm with my friend Bill Anderson. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on, John. It's awesome to be here.
I like the real casual for you. You're usually, pretty dressed up in the bank attire.
Super casual today. I'm actually participating in the Graduate School of Banking at the University of Pennsylvania. So I'm taking a little break from that to be here today.
Online.
So I'm in my online. Unfortunately, the first year was in Philly, but the last 2 years have been online. So I'm in the Startup Sioux Falls t-shirt and the Minnesota Twins hat today. I wore the Twins hat for you mostly.
I appreciate that.
I wanted to get some friendly vibes going.
Supporting, the team, the volunteer, the nonprofit that you serve on, as well as the local baseball team. I guess local for us. Well, let's jump right in. Tell folks what you do today, and then we'll sort of reverse engineer because your resume is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it's pretty bizarre. It's a random walk to somewhere. I came to my role, Chief Customer Experience Officer at the First National Bank in Sioux Falls in 2017.
It's been that long already.
It hasn't been that long, actually. I joined the organization as the Customer Experience Manager. And really my role was to help think a little bit more concretely about how we evolve the bank to become a more modern community bank. Yep. And that there are all kinds of ways to think about that. I mean, from the moment people walk into our facilities, what does that look and feel like, to the way that they encounter our digital technology, to how they can adopt products and services. And since I started in that role, my role has just kind of expanded a little bit. So I managed to have a background in marketing, which we can get into. And so I took on leadership of the marketing team when one of our executives retired. And then not long after that, I took on facilities and information technology and customer service and deposit operations and then eventually business solutions, which is our business customer facing deposit related group of people. And so in some ways I'm a bit like a chief operating officer with marketing involved. And really the whole idea is, once our salespeople have done their work, my job is to ensure with my people that the experience that our customers have is great and that we're always listening to the voice of the customer and trying to evolve our products and services to be what they want and need and also be competitive in a really, really heavily banked environment in Sioux Falls.
Yeah, I think that's where my question lies. Where does Chief Experience Officer begin and where does it end? Because it can argue it touches everything.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, I think one of the great parts of being a Chief Experience Officer in any organization is you do have this accountability to the customer, and the customer is internal and external. Because if people have a lousy experience internally, it reflects externally. So there's that kind of non-linear path, and then there's the linear path directly to the customer. So we're constantly, engaging the customer in our work. So to me, that's really exciting. But you have a lot of responsibility and not always a lot of authority. So the other thing you have to be in a chief customer experience officer role is a diplomat. Most of my teams are shared services. So the marketing team has lots of experience that they need to be able to draw on to work across the organization, but it's a finite pool. The IT team is the same way. Our deposit services team, we're all a shared service in my area. So as much as unilaterally, I would love to say we're doing this and this and this and this, and this is the new technology and this is the new investment. I don't have that power to do that, and I think it's okay that I don't. It's actually, in a role like mine, my job is to probably make 20 decisions, 15 of which are way off base, and then 10 of which get carved off because of financial reasons, and 5 of which are impractical from any variety of reasons, so we settle on 3. And so I think that titration of that with my colleagues is really important. And that's energizing to me. It's hard some days because you wish you could just say, it's happening this way. But on the flip side, the value is that you actually get to filter it through a lot of really smart people who not only are my teammates, but they're folks I work with laterally and vertically in the organization.
And maybe from my perspective, you play the role of being the non-banking guy at the bank.
It's true. Yeah.
That's your value proposition.
That's
sort
right.
of other perspectives, right?
Yeah, it's been fascinating actually, and the timing is really interesting for when we're talking, because having been at the Graduate School of Banking for the last 2 or 3 days, I actually just came out of a diversity and inclusion set of seminars. And one of the things that a lot of the folks in that conversation noted was that banking is kind of traditionally, you get into banking, you grow up in banking, and the challenge with that is that then you have a tendency to view the people who are your customers just like you, and you have a tendency to view your colleagues as just like you, and you have a tendency not to really scratch underneath the surface a little bit to say, okay, who are our customers? What do they really want? And what kind of perspectives do we need to really mine to grow our business? Because I have a tendency to think it seems to be working okay.
Yeah, and especially in what did you say, 136-year-old bank.
136-year-old bank this
geographically
September.
A relatively small area.
Yeah, we're pretty geographically constrained, but the idea of where we are in financial services, a community bank. Community banks are this remarkable resource, and we have a tendency to sometimes be myopic and say, well, we serve the Greater Sioux Falls area, but frankly, we serve the Greater Sioux Falls area plus, where folks graduate from Sioux Falls, Lincoln, Sioux Falls, Washington. Their families have been banking with us, but they moved to New York City or Florida or what have you. What are we doing to keep them underneath our tent? And so, or they're going to move somewhere else. They're going to choose to bank with a larger bank. And so we have an opportunity, I think, to really think differently, but kind of the same, to be the same community bank we've always been, but be able to provide products and services.
Well, I think 20 years ago, that wasn't even possible. I remember leaving Brookings and being with the Brookings Community Bank, and then going to school in Iowa and moving to Minneapolis. The restraint was there's no ATMs, right? That was the reason. Now that's not an issue.
Well, and I think that's what a lot of people run into is that on your financial journey, you often will prioritize convenience over preference. And I think that's really that was the case for me moving from Huron as a kid to Lincoln, Nebraska. Well, it made sense to bank with Big Bank X because I knew that there was a Big Bank X ATM in the student union at the University of Nebraska. And I think increasingly that's becoming less relevant, or the opportunity for it to become less relevant is there for forward-thinking community banks.
When our phone becomes the bank anyway.
Exactly. Precisely.
Yep. So I made that point about being kind of the non-banking guy and your diverse perspectives. They include, let's see if I make sure I get the whole list. It's leading a marketing agency, an education app in the App Store, healthcare for retirement centers.
That's correct.
And then most interestingly, probably an analyst at the CIA.
Yeah. And in between all of that, a university professor and a guy who ran a research unit at the university. So,
So what's the through line there, or is there absolutely none?
I think there are maybe 3 through lines. The first is a real depth of intellectual curiosity. I'm not saying I'm a deep person. I'm just a really curious person. I can't stop thinking about interesting problems, and so curiosity is one thing. And I think people can be curious about a lot. I've been fortunate over the course of my academic life, my professional life, to also have the opportunity to acquire really interesting tools. So, data analytics, statistics, research methodology,
Sure.
Comparative political economy, cultural analysis. I was thinking today, reflecting on a course in Black political thought that I took as an undergraduate. Just really interesting perspectives that have helped me try to spin the world in slightly different ways and stare at it differently.
Yeah.
And so in any one of those roles, that tool has traveled. It's just the intellectual curiosity and just enough ability to analyze problems so that I know that I need to bring smarter people to the problem to do it better than I could.
Sure.
And to know what kind of skill sets you need to bring to the problem. And I think, the third one is sort of a resilience, a professional resilience. To be an academic, which I was for a period, to be a CIA analyst, you learn that you're not nearly as smart as you thought you were. And I think I've learned a sense of professional humility and resilience. When you submit an academic paper to a journal and you get the feedback back and they tell you you're the biggest idiot in the world, and you get that from an anonymous reviewer, number one, you have to shake off the fact
Check
that
your ego a little
you
bit.
probably aren't the dumbest person in the world. And
True.
you probably caught them on a bad day, and they were giving you anonymous feedback. But it does give you a sense that, as much as we believe we know, we really don't know a fraction of what we need to.
Sure.
And so that goes back to the curiosity. It's right, that virtuous loop that takes you back to, well, why didn't I get it right? And how could I get it more right?
Yeah.
And it just continues
Because those
that
first
circle.
two steps on your resume would certainly be roles that often involve people who are probably quite smart, right? CIA and a university professor, and you innately curious, and you seem to your mind feels like a pretty good trap to me. It keeps a lot. It doesn't let go of a lot of these tools that you pick up.
Well, the tools they don't really leave me too much. Some of the day-to-day facts leave me. I need a lot better calendar and scheduling focus. But I think the intelligence community. I remember writing papers for the vice president and the president, and writing a piece that got a challenge from an assistant secretary of defense around a very controversial topic, and having a dialogue as a 28-year-old analyst with the CIA with an undersecretary of defense, where they disagreed with one of your positions.
Yep.
And it's weird I was a high school debater. I never imagined I'd be in a debate with an assistant secretary of defense as a paid employee of the federal government.
Yeah, the stakes actually matter.
Right, that's right. And to have someone like that say, I think you're completely wrong, and for me to lay out the case for why I thought it was right, and to not get a response back, it's like, hey, I think I might have won that argument, but I lost far more than I won.
Sure.
And you learn that's the case.
That's part of the job.
Yeah, it's the integrity of the work and the quality of the work and the belief in the process that you follow that really ends up being the reward. And that was the case too in the university environment.
So just to cherry pick those, there's so many of these, but how would an experience like that with the assistant defense secretary, how would you use that tool working at the bank today?
Sure. I think anyone who has to present a business case for any change that requires any sort of personnel investment or dollar investment, I find that every day I'm either using soft skills or hard skills to try to make a case for why we need to make a change or why we need to evolve the bank. And as someone who's come from outside of the bank, I'm fortunate. I have so many smart and talented people who understand the nuances of financial services, and they're great at rolling their eyes at me when I ask these questions.
Yeah,
and 9 out of 10 of the questions are questions that have been asked, they've been answered, and they've been answered adequately enough that we probably don't need to go further down that rabbit hole. But I think, as I think about what, those engagements with the undersecretary and what it's like to work with my colleagues, both laterally and vertically, and then the people who report to me in my team, I've got to be able to make a really good case. And it's a good case that's not just around the hard facts. It's a good case around how does it feel? What are our predispositions? What are our biases? What roads have we gone down? How have people invested in the past and not felt like they've been heard? Because as much as I think my thinking or anyone else's thinking is original, it probably isn't original.
Sure.
It's probably we're just trying to tackle the question in a slightly different way.
Yeah. And do you think that I'd be curious, since I've generally worked outside of an 11-month stint in consulting in my own organization, so you've done the entrepreneurial thing too, where you led small teams.
Yes.
In those, sometimes those organizations tend to they just agree or say yes to whatever you say, right? Because you're in charge. So how how is that a different spin that you're still making sure you're checking in on everyone's opinion and still making the case, even though they could just say, yes, boss.
Right. Well, and I failed that way. I mean, there's no question. When I was a university faculty member, I ran a research unit at the university, and it was a one-person shop, but I worked with a lot of other folks. But my job was really to go out, get the business, bring it in, figure out how to structure the business, work with graduate students primarily to get the work done, and then bring the work back out. And I ended up becoming kind of this gobbler of all things I could get my hands on, and really probably not doing as good a job hearing other people's perspectives, both about the capacity of the work that we were doing, sometimes the nature of the work that we were doing. And I burned out and failed because of that. And I've been down that road where I thought I knew it all and I was just going to keep doing it. And, I would work from 9 o'clock at night until 3 a.m. because the kids were asleep. And, I've been through that, almost that startup fiasco where you get so myopic and so focused on this one thing that you're doing. So I think, as I step back, I think, I've failed that way. I failed that way. And I think moving into healthcare, I had an amazing group of people that I worked with who knew more about healthcare than me. And I think the beauty of going into other industries where you maybe aren't the expert is that it forces you to have a whole lot of humility.
A lot of empathy.
And a ton of empathy, a lot of listening. And I think, if you were to ask my teams, I think they would say, oh, Bill could listen better. And there's no question. I absolutely could listen better.
Sure.
But I also feel like I know what I don't know, and that to me, I think, is one of the things that professional wisdom has provided me, is that I have some tools, but I don't know a lot about a lot. And maybe that's the Buddhist journey, right?
Well, and those are tough leadership shoes to step in, where management or board might say, hey, we need a fresh perspective, right? Let's get someone who's never worked in this. Let's get an entrepreneurial thinker or an academic. But then all of a sudden you're leading a team of somebody who's worked in a bank for 25 years, and they're thinking, what does this guy know? Like, why should I listen to him? Right.
And I think the key, I had this conversation with our CFO at the bank yesterday, and he and I were talking a little bit about my role, because at times, it can be frustrating because I feel like I know what I want to do, and I know it. And the question is, well, how credible could you possibly be not being in financial services? And I sometimes find myself asking myself that question too.
Sure.
It's like, well,
some imposter syndrome there.
Do I really know anything about anything here? But what he shared with me yesterday was, he said, if you look at the CFOs of major companies who make career transitions, they often make transitions to a completely different industry.
Sure.
And CEOs make transitions to completely different industries. So CEO of Procter & Gamble moves to be the CEO of GM, hypothetically.
Yeah.
And it's really more about,
because they know how to manage.
They know how to manage. They know how to lead. They know what they don't know. They know what questions to ask. They know where to start. They know how to identify talent.
Yep.
And they understand how to listen to customers, both internally and externally. And I think that to me is something that I'm trying to get better at every day. I don't think I'm even close to being where I need to be, but I'm 46, so I've got some time, I think. I haven't timed out quite yet.
Do you feel like, as you look back on that diverse resume, just what are you proud of the different experiences of I imagine the people you got to meet through these roles has been quite fascinating and diverse. Was there one that you're like, I wish I had another shot at that one, or like that was the right amount of time?
Yeah, I think my time at CIA was a really interesting time. I was fortunate, and we'll maybe talk a little bit later about how people have really influenced or affected professional life. But I was fortunate to work with a woman named Fran Moore at CIA, and she ended up becoming the deputy director for intelligence for CIA.
Wow.
She's a really talented person. I caught her, mid-career, and she was in this place where she had identified some sort of spark in me, and she was willing to foster that spark.
Cool.
And she brought me along with her out of an office into a task force, and we spent a time in a task force together working cross-agency in the intelligence community. Then she brought me back out, and then she brought me to the director of national intelligence. And I actually just started at the director of national intelligence. It was about 4 months in, and we realized we were about ready to have our first child, and we were living, in Arlington, Virginia, and we thought, we probably need a little more space, and we probably need to think a little bit differently about life. So I remember walking up to her and saying, Fran, we need to go home. I need to go home. And she looked at me and she said, I understand, but you understand what you're leaving behind. And I said, I do. So do I regret leaving it behind? I don't. I mean, I made the right decision, and we made the right decision for ourselves and for our family. But I always wonder what would have happened.
Sure.
Yeah, what would have happened. And of course, I don't gnash my teeth about it. It's not like it's sort of like the, what if I would have started that game as quarterback in high school?
Yeah.
That's really not what it is. It's more just like, I wonder what that life would have been like.
Yeah, sort of a parallel universe.
Exactly. Bizarro Bill.
Yeah. Maybe this will be more of a selfish question than for the listeners, but then how have you prepared yourself for those career switches? Because that's something I'm getting ready to do and don't know what's on the other side. We as humans like to be comfortable, and we like to kind of fall into routines and get to work with the same people. And so is there any lessons there making these large changes, both geography, industry, role, that you've picked up over the years?
I think there are a couple things that really I lean back on. One is just the strength of my foundations. I was fortunate to grow up in a great family, and fortunate to have a great family. And so that's number one. I just had a confidence that no matter what, I'd be supported. And I think that makes a big difference. Number two, I felt like my training was good. It wasn't perfect, but it gave me, every one of my experiences helped me accrue a new set of skills that I felt like I could really lean into no matter what I went to next. And then I think having a reasonable fear of not being terrified. So, and that doesn't necessarily make sense, but you need to walk into something and say, it's okay to be terrified that this is different. It's going to feel weird for a while. And then to just take the time to kind of tamp that down and to understand, okay, where are the first best opportunities? And in any transition, where are the first best opportunities? Where can I be most valuable to both get comfortable for myself, but also to demonstrate that I have some competence that may be valuable to others? I think that becomes really, really critical.
So where along the way what made you get into marketing? Because I feel like while marketing has become very data-driven and using analytics, there's still a lot of human element, a lot of art, a lot of intuition, sometimes some assumption, guesswork, I guess, which doesn't seem like to me like you, the way I know you. But how did you get into that?
Yeah, I think, I did a ton of survey research as an undergraduate and a graduate student. Spent a lot of time studying psychology and biopsychology. So, I think that there are a lot of natural...
That makes sense,
there are a lot of natural intersections with marketing. And the quantitative research that I did as a graduate student really prepared me to analyze any kind of data. It doesn't really matter if it's political behavior data or if it's buying behavior data. So I had a good deal of comfort with that. The other side of marketing that I think is kind of fascinating is that marketing is not just about external, it's about internal. And how do you educate people about products and services within an organization? How do you develop training plans? How do you ensure that they understand the products and services and how to sell them?
So they can.
And so a good deal of what I've done on the marketing side is that piece. It's, okay, this is what we have. How do we talk about it in the most effective manner possible so that our internal salespeople can communicate that effectively to the customer? And then we can also understand what works and doesn't work about that communication cadence so that we can get it more right. And so
interesting.
And that goes back to my teaching background, to having taught, right? It's okay, what's the most effective way to teach someone how to talk about something, and
bring them along.
Skill traveled.
Interesting. I like that. So speaking of leadership, we were fortunate to, that's how I got to know you well, do the Leadership South Dakota program with Rick Melmer, who's been on this show.
That's great.
Great program. Part of that program is, of course, visiting corners of the state, meeting other leaders, seeing other programs in the state, but also just really getting to know your fellow classmates and opening up in sometimes some very personal moments. You shared a story, I don't remember what part of your life, but a pretty intimate story about dealing with some anxiety. And tell us a little bit about what you're willing to share about what happened there and what you've learned about that, because this definitely applies to leadership as we talk about the fear that you mentioned and being okay with some fear.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I remember telling the stories in Rapid City, actually,
I remember that
in the ballroom at the
Alex
Johnson. It was really kind of a strange room, very strange place. The story is pretty simple. It was October of 2015. and I was going through some pretty significant personal and professional crises. And a friend of mine, good friend of mine, I'll probably talk about her later. She said, we need to meet. We need to sit down. We need to talk. And she said pretty bluntly to me 3 things. She said, number 1, you need to get some professional help. You need to go talk to a psychiatrist and see if they can help you somehow or another moderate your anxiety and challenges with depression, because that's the first step.
Yeah.
Number 2, you need to find a good therapist who you can talk to and be honest with about what's going on in your mind, so you can develop coping strategies that can be more productive coping strategies than some of the ones that you have. And number 3 is, make sure you surround yourself with your people, and the good people, the ones that you can trust and feel great about, your family and friends, and be really protective of that.
That foundation that you mentioned.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And so that was it was a striking moment for me, and it really transformed some of how I thought about my life, because I think as entrepreneurs, and I think my career, if I stare back, it is sort of this weird entrepreneurial journey, but not the typical one.
Yeah.
I mean, I've typically been an intrapreneur, so I've been in an organization and I've looked for new ways to do things and grown that way, and I've moved from federal government to state government to large healthcare to my own, partnership in marketing and advertising to a startup in the educational app development area, to deep web scraping. And I've worked in lots of weird places, to banking, and I think in some ways there are parallels to that with the entrepreneur's journey about, okay, what's next? What do I do next? How do I energize myself? And there's always a next fix, right? As an entrepreneur, or as someone who's really excited about ideas and is deeply curious and wants to be successful. And I think, I have perfectionist tendencies too, which doesn't help.
Yep.
And so, I think finding healthy ways to pursue that growth as a person, as a professional, but also finding healthy coping mechanisms to deal with some of the anxiety and stress that might be unproductive was really, really important for me. And I mean, have I gotten it 100% right? No way. But I mean, have I gone further down that development path? I think so. And I think every leader, no matter who they are, no matter where they are in an organization or they are in their personal lives, that opportunity for deep reflection and people who will tell you honestly what's going on and what they think and what help you might need, it was invaluable for me. Again, have I got it 100% right? No.
Do you think that is that? Let's see how I'm trying to phrase this question. Those people who are willing to tell you honestly what you need to hear, not what they think you want to hear.
Right.
How do you find those people? I mean, because the first thought is family, but not even all families do that.
Right.
And so
I've been really lucky over the course of my career to have people who have invested in me personally and professionally, and who they've kind of self-select. I don't even know how it happened. They felt like, this guy has potential, and he's creating noise he doesn't need to create, and they've stepped up and stepped in. I've never actively sought out someone to say, hey, will you tell me how messed up I am? They've just honestly done it themselves. But to be honest with you,
because they clearly care.
Right, that's exactly right. That those people have been willing to put their relationship with me on the line to tell me a truth that I might not want to hear, and their gamble has paid off, I think, in a lot of ways. Because I think I do need those people, and I want to be that person for other. Because
I'm sure in some of those moments you disagreed or denied it, or maybe you didn't trust what they said.
Most of the time, I knew it.
Yeah,
I knew it. I just needed somebody to unearth it for me and take it out of the shadow and put it up in the light and say, this is the thing. This is the thing that's not working, and you need to live up to better standards than this thing that you're hiding in the dark or you're shoving in a closet.
Yeah, because you said something before we were rolling the recording is where you said leaders tend to always feel like they need to do more.
Yeah.
Add on more and do more and push further. How do you know when you've done enough, when you've gone far enough? Well,
I don't know the answer to that. I wish I knew the answer to that question.
Sure.
I was visiting my family last weekend, and my folks run a furniture store, and they have since my dad was since I was tiny, and my dad was an engineer and moved back to Huron to take over his family's furniture store.
Is it second generation or third? Or?
It's a second and a half, kind of.
Okay.
My great grandfather ran the furniture store for a period, and then passed away suddenly, and my grandfather took over the furniture store. But my dad is a perfectionist, and so, I was thinking about that as I was actually walking over to do the podcast. It's like, how would I think about perfectionism, and when is enough, and when do you empower people to do the work, and how do you coach people? And, I grew up in a household where my dad was an outstanding business person, a good community business person, but he also probably burned the candle too hard on both ends with respect to doing all of the detailed things themselves rather than empowering other people to do it. I think the hardest thing for me is to, on the one hand, not do that. I don't want to be that person. But on the other hand, just leave it all to chance, right? Sure. It's like the biggest muddy part of leadership is, well, just let everybody do it and we'll figure it out. That doesn't necessarily work, and it's certainly not.
Take everything.
Yeah. The lesson that one of my mentors shared with me, actually from another person in the community who's really been successful in leadership, is leadership is knowing when you need to drop down to the very granular level and understand things and dig in really deeply and understand every bit of nuance of it. And once you understand it and you feel like everything is tracking right, then go right back up and start soaring out and kind of and I don't like it as like swoop in leadership. I don't think that's the right thing. You have to have a pulse all the time. But the idea is where you see one of those vitals a little bit off, like, okay, let me understand this a little bit better and be curious about where those vitals are off. And so
I think my friend Brian Graham calls that the opposite of what you shouldn't do is the swoop and poop. Like you swoop in and poop, crap all over everything and then leave. The mess for your team, right?
Yeah. I mean, more of the time it's not being reactionary, but instead keeping your fingers on the vitals. So I don't want to be in a situation, nobody does, where, the patient's having a heart attack. We need to come in and slam on their chest until we break their sternum, and then we hope it all worked out. It's more, the blood pressure's a little high here. Let's figure out why the blood pressure's a little high. That's a coaching moment. That's not a swooping moment. And to me, that's the hardest part of leadership is, that notion of, I can't do it all myself. There's no way I can do it all myself. I trust my people to do the work, and I do 100%. It's just when is their pulse a little bit up, and do I know it, and can I get there before we've got an emergent situation?
Yeah, because I certainly am curious. I would imagine listeners are too, because I mean you have a lot in your life, right? Like you commute generally most days. COVID's changed that maybe a little bit, but like you don't live in town here. You have a big job. You have a big family who is in activities, and is there an indicator light that turns on, or is there a feeling that you're like, okay, I might be that feeling of burning the candle on both ends? How do you know when you might be dipping in that zone?
Yeah, I think I've known it historically when I get home and at 8:00 at night I'm asleep on the sofa. Like that's a pretty good indicator. I fall asleep at 8:00. I wake up at 1 a.m. and then I go to bed.
Yeah, you're that's not in your bed when you're sleeping.
Right, that's a pretty good indicator, and that's also a pretty good indicator of my mood as well. If I'm not so energized that I'm in that kind of state, I also know that there's a whole lot of other things going on that I probably need to kind of pressure test in my life. But that's one indication. I think I personally find that fogginess, I can feel it. I don't know. I think a lot of other people say it's just cognitive overload, right?
Yeah.
Like my brain is not refreshing at the rate I need it to, and
makes sense. Yeah.
And so I notice that personally, where I just feel like I'm not as acute as I need to be, that my assimilation of new facts isn't where it needs to be, my ability to recite the facts isn't where it needs to be. And it's just because there's just too much. The noise is too great, and I can't get a signal. And so I think, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, would I have been that self-aware? Probably not. I would have just fought through it, or assumed if I just worked another 4 hours, it'll probably work itself out. And it doesn't. It never does.
That's kind of academic, right? Like pull the all-nighter.
That's right.
And keep going, grind it. Yeah. Do you have a short list of your solutions through that fogginess? I mean, I know you're a runner.
I think
sleep, running.
I was thinking about that as I was walking up here, and you didn't really give me any preview to questions.
No,
so I was sort of getting I just want to make sure I clarify that for the listeners. But it's amazing how simple it is. It's more sleep, it's better eating,
Yeah.
and it's more exercise.
Yeah.
Like, it's ridiculous how simple it is for me.
Yeah.
Those three things, if any one of those things is out of whack, I am not the same human being.
Yep.
And what's ironic is, the stresses and strains of everyday life can push you so easily out of those productive routines. And I know it. I know it the minute that I get out of those routines that
the first things we sacrifice are sleep or exercise. Right. I don't have time to exercise. I have time to sleep.
Right. Or I'm tired. You're just too tired. I'm too damn tired to go exercise. I'm too damn tired to get good sleep. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But that's exactly it, is that you start to make excuses for why you shouldn't live as well as you possibly can. And the irony is that you won't live even close to as well as you can by making those excuses.
That's good. Yeah. Well, let's go to, usually I do this as an end question.
Yeah.
But you've mentioned it a couple times, so I want to spend some time. It sounds like you've had some pretty key influential folks in your life that have shaped your leadership journey or that have impacted you. So let's talk about those.
I have
people.
several. So I've already mentioned Fran. So Fran Moore, she was.
Do you know what she's doing now?
She is retired from the intelligence community. I follow her. I follow her on LinkedIn, so it's fun to watch. She's now a senior consultant in the intelligence community, and just one of the most brilliant minds. Just tremendously talented. When I joined her team at CIA, I remember the pitch, and you'll appreciate this because this is very similar, I think, to your higher educational journey, or may have been.
Yeah.
I was interviewing for several offices. One of them was a counterintelligence center, which is this weird little place that lives on the cusp of analysis and operations. So part of counterintelligence center is investigating people in the organization who may be spying against the organization.
Oh,
I didn't work in that part. I didn't want any part of that.
Sounds like a drama,
TV
drama.
That was, but the other side of it was this group that did analysis of foreign intelligence service activity abroad. So we were trying to understand methods and practices, and so it was a weird little thing, right? But it's important to understand how your allies or your enemies are working against you.
Yeah.
And Fran said to me, and I was also looking at working in the Office of Russian and European Analysis, which is like that's like the Harvard of CIA, right? I mean,
really?
Historically, Russia was what
Sure.
everybody cared about. So the best analysts, the brightest minds went
Sure.
there.
Yeah.
They went to NISA to work on Middle Eastern-related issues, Levant and Middle Eastern-related issues. And I had a couple of offers to go to those kinds of offices and use the skills that I had. And Fran pitched this to me. She said, well, I mean, you could go to Harvard, which is OREA and is NISA, or you could come to McAllister, and I consider my office McAllister. And I don't know if she did any background research on me, but one of my final schools in terms of decision was McAllister College, and she was from upstate New York, so she had no idea.
This is a real story.
This
You're
is
not
a real.
just using
Yeah,
this
this is a real story. She said,
Okay.
"Well, you can go to McAllister, you can go to Harvard." And she said, "I'm McAllister, so you need to decide if you want a small
No
boutique
way.
experience." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, good job either doing your research or
Just pulling it.
right, or just pulling a college out of your." But yeah, I never regretted being. And I learned attention to detail from her. I learned how to brief, to be succinct, to write better, to think better, to collaborate across organizations, to have a backbone in tough conversations. I learned so much from Fran, and there's not a day that goes by I don't rely on some of the reserve of skills that she imparted to me.
That's cool.
And at CIA, I also had a mentor named John Morris, and John has passed away. He died of pancreatic cancer several years ago. And John was one of those mentors that he just was always there. He was always talking to people about you, even if you didn't know that he was. And so you would have people mention you. I had people mention me, well, yeah, John Morris had mentioned you to me. And that created opportunities to try new things. And I lived at his house for a summer and got to know him really well. But John was one of those kind of mentors that you think, as his mentee, number one, he never signed you up to be his mentee. You just kind of became that way, which is awesome. But then when he passed away, I got in touch with a couple of people and found out that, I was one of about 40 people that considered John to be their mentor. And none of us knew about each other. We just knew that we were the most special person in the world.
He made you feel like you were the only.
Because John Morris took us under his wing. And so, yeah, John has just had a tremendous impact on me. He was a nerdy guy, 6'6", mathematician, PhD mathematician from the University of Colorado, and low raspy voice. But I learned a ton from him. so John stands up strong. My grandfather was another person that really is he was a leader in the military, went to the Navy at 16,
Wow.
World War II, served in the Pacific Theater, grew up one of 12 kids in the rural Nevada desert, left his house so he could put some food on the table for his parents, ended up becoming the first command sergeant major of a non-commissioned command sergeant major in the Army's history. He moved into the Army after he left the Navy.
Oh my goodness.
And was a drill sergeant, Fort Benning in Georgia.
Yep.
And just one of these guys. I read all of his papers after he passed away a few years ago. And you just saw how he made men, but he did it by understanding them and really having a kindness and perspective about him. And all the commendations I read of him were just these lists of why he was such a good man to his men. I mean, there's nothing he wouldn't do for them. And I always felt that same way, this sense of pride. Like I always wanted to do well for him because he was a good leader of people.
Yeah.
And my father, I learned a ton in the business from my father and how to not settle for what's in front of you, but to always try to make it a little bit better and to invest in your community. My dad's a huge community member.
So they're still in Huron.
He's still in Huron and still active. And he served in the community in Greater Huron Economic Development. And he served as president of South Dakota Retailers Association. And
cool.
So he just really gave professionally because it was important to him to keep the Huron community vibrant and growing. And so that's why I'm involved with Startup Sioux Falls. That's why I'm involved with the Vermilion Cultural Association.
I was going to say, does that shape your feelings about why you guys live in Vermilion and
100%.
And investing in that smaller
It's the
community?
investment in Vermilion for sure. Yeah.
Which is where you taught too.
Yeah, I taught at USD, and several years ago, a group of us formed a nonprofit to buy a movie theater in Vermilion that was likely to go out of business otherwise, and that's become just a successful, fun, vibrant enterprise. Despite COVID, we managed to survive COVID, and so that's been an amazing experience. But yeah, 100%. The opportunity to invest in the community is that way that I can really push entrepreneurship in a slightly different way.
Well, I'm gonna, like you said, I didn't do a great job of prepping you, so I'm gonna ask a longer version of this question to give you a chance to prep on the fly.
All right.
But if you remember when you came to the Lemonly retreat and facilitated a few years ago, you asked us a question about what are your hopes and your fears in 3 years, right? Do you remember that?
Yep.
So you came and facilitated that day at the lake at Lake Madison, and you asked us that question. This is like 2017, I think, maybe 18. I don't remember.
It was right after I joined the bank, so 2017.
Okay, was it? Okay, the fall of 17 then. And as you, I think, sort of teased out to us that day is we'll do this exercise, and then 3 years later, which has happened, we'll go back and look at these. And most likely, a lot of the hopes will have come true and a lot of the fears will have not.
Right. Yeah.
And so this document lives in everybody's individual folder of what we call our PGP, or personal growth plan. And it's been fun to go back now that we hit that 3 years, and a lot of those things, as you predicted, were true, right?
Well, as you predicted.
True.
You were just the sage ones that they answered the question.
Good point. So I want to end there, and then we'll go with some little rapid fire.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. Who knows? Maybe we'll do this podcast in 3 years, maybe not. But what are your hopes and fears in 3 years?
So I like to divide them into personal and professional. So, professionally, I work in a financial institution that is at kind of everybody says financial services is always at an inflection point, but I think more than ever, with financial technology, fintech companies becoming an increasing part of people's lives, and the millennials and younger thinking differently about how the way the world works. My fear is that community banking will become less relevant, and we're going to be fighting a battle that we didn't even know we were fighting until it came right to our door.
Interesting.
So that's something that is a professional fear. Professional hope is that for an organization like First National, that we will be able to challenge our assumptions in ways that help us grow outside of this market, and do so in a way that's organic and supports customers who want to be with us for life. They're the people who bank with us as their first savings account, and they can continue to bank with us. And so professionally, that's what I hope for. And then I hope my teams can continue to develop around that vision.
Cool.
Personal hopes, I really hope that, let's start personal fears, because I think that's where I want to start first. Personal fears, I have really amazing kids, and I have good relationships with the kids. They're different relationships with each of my kids. And I always fear that relationship will change as they get older.
Yeah.
Or it'll evolve in ways that doesn't feel great. And so, I have teenagers now. And so I'm fascinated to see how that grows. It's a fear of mine, but it's also a hope that, that we can continue to have this really fun bond and be great together. Hopes wise, just want to live a happy, personal, peaceful life. That's what I really hope for, is this opportunity to, stay true to being a good person, above and beyond being a good professional. I don't know. It's pretty abstract, but, I don't have a target goal there.
Sure.
I just have a general feeling.
You'll know it if you feel
Yeah,
it.
that's right.
Yep.
That's right.
Well, it seems like on the kids side, you've already passed a lot of those hurdles. If you feel like as you have teenage kids and still have that relationship.
Well, it goes up and down. I think, I'm still trying to figure out how do teenage girls work? I don't know that really well.
Never did figure that out.
No, teenage boys I've got pretty well figured out. That's pretty straightforward. But I'm still working on the teenage girls part.
Cool. That's a great answer. Thanks for doing that.
Yeah.
All right, well, rapid fire as we
Yes.
do a couple here to finish up. So I know you're a big reader. What's a book that you might recommend to somebody often?
So a lot of people are maybe watching the Amazon miniseries right now, but Colson Whitehead's The Confederate Railroad is absolutely brilliant. It deserves to be read. And
Is that the title of the show? I didn't even know.
It is the title of the show as well. Barry Jenkins directed it, the miniseries, but the book is brilliant. It's beautiful. It's African American science fiction, but it's historical science fiction.
Okay, sure.
So it's super powerful. Once you go down the Colson Whitehead rabbit hole, you won't want to stop. The Nickel Boys is as brilliant as no, it's not the Confederate. It's Underground Railroad. I'm sorry.
Underground
it's the
Railroad.
Underground
Okay.
Railroad. Yeah.
Cool. This could be pre-pandemic or during the pandemic, but I've been asking folks how you unplug when you do feel like maybe you're getting to that point of being overwhelmed and doing too much. How do you unplug?
I go run.
Yeah, that's what I figured you were going to say.
I go run. Easy.
We've run together, and
Yes.
it's been, I think
We ran up to Dinosaur
you
Park.
might be
in
the only
Rapid.
person I've ever had a running meeting with, which I enjoyed.
That was pretty fun. That was a new experience because I typically am not a person who likes to chit chat, but so it was a pretty breathless meeting. But it was good.
And then we finished with a beer too. So
That's
that was
true.
Good.
We knew we
earned our calories
We were
back.
working toward a goal.
We touched on parenting, but parents are absolutely leaders in my mind. So what's a piece of parenting advice you would share?
Close your mouth and listen. Close your mouth and listen. I think sometimes as parents, and I'm guilty of it too, I want to solve things. I want to fix things. And most of the time, I found that with all of my kids, they just want to be heard.
It's really good.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. Well, we talked about leaders too. So I guess the last one we'll finish with is an interview question at Lemonly, which is, what's your superpower? The thing you do best?
So I've been thinking about that a lot this week as part of my graduate school banking experience. I'm a believer. I'm a believer, and not kind of in the old 1960s Monkees song way. But people have asked me, what's your personal mantra? And it's making the possible probable. To me, making the possible probable is at the core of who I am. And so I'm a believer in possibilities. I'm a real believer in possibilities. And my role in whatever way I can do it, whether it's through coaching and mentoring and leadership or tactical skills, is to see if we can take that seed and make it grow.
I love that. And especially, I feel like you're by trade, you would be a person who's like, let's figure out the probability, the data, the likelihood, let's analyze it, let's decide, well, if mathematically this isn't going to work, we better not do it. But on top of all that, it's just a belief.
That's right. Yeah,
no formula is going to tell you. You just got to believe in it.
It's faith, and it's culture, and it's creativity, and it's optimism, and it's perseverance, and all of those things are this magnificent stew pot, because no manner of probability can overcome those things.
Yeah.
Not any.
Well, that's an awesome place to leave, and for leaders to make sure they have that in their stew pot. I like that. So thanks for being here, Bill.
Yeah, thank you, John. It's really a pleasure. Thanks for having me on. All right.
And that is it for our conversation with Bill Anderson here on the Leadmore podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in and for listening. As always, we drop new episodes of the Leadmore podcast on Thursdays, so you can go and subscribe on Apple, on Spotify, on Stitcher, wherever you listen. Give us a 5-star rating if you're willing, and hit me up on Twitter. Tweet me at John T. Meyer, who you would like to see on the Leadmore podcast, or if you want to be on the Leadmore podcast, give me a reason why. Tweet me at John T. Meyer. I want to hear, as we're looking for a new guest here in our second year of the show. So thank you as always for listening. Take care and be well.